Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Mathyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. We talked about converting our sense of ownership into trusteeship. And this is one of the huge teachings in what we have to grasp before we move on. Now, first of all, what is this ownership? What does it mean to have a sense of ownership? It means that this is my life, right? This is my spiritual journey. This is my body. This is my time, right? This is my rights. So all of these nouns, we proceed with this word mine, and we claim it as though, we have the right to this. But if you think about it, time doesn't really care if you say my time. In fact, you're only saying my time in time. It's only time that allows you to say this is my time. So this means if we go around saying these statements like my body, my life, my spouse, my knowledge, my journey, my right to liberation, then it creates so many distortions as we spoke last week. But before we get onto these distortions, I want to also now cover what is trusteeship. So I gave you a rough picture of what is ownership. What is trusteeship? Because we said we need to convert ownership into trusteeship. Trusteeship is recognizing that you are endowed with this body. That means you are entrusted this instrument, which is capable of interfacing with the world. You're also endowed this instrument, which is capable of recognizing what is the very nature of this instrument. But the question is, you're endowed this instrument by what? By the grand order. And for how long? For a limited time. So what is this grand order by which you are endowed this instrument, which you use in order to discover the truth of this very instrument? The grand order. And that very grand order is also the same order, the same intelligence that is also helping everyone else have a body entrusted to them. So yes, it is true if you say, it is my body, but you need to understand what it means to say it is my body. It's only your body in reference or in a sense of being given to you to be used in alignment with what? With that very grand order that has given you that body. So what has given you the body? The grand order. You didn't create your body. In fact, all you need to do is just eat food and you just come up with this person that you are now from the standpoint of the physical body. You have a certain hair, a certain eye, a certain personality. All you have to do is just eat. And then everything else gets done for you. By what? By this grand order. So what does this mean? To be entrusted with this body, I need to align my body with my actions, with my thoughts, with this very grand order that has given me this body. So what is this grand order again? It is Ishvara in the form of Dharma. That is why it's important to know what Dharma is. It's not, see, if you just speak about oneness and you don't speak about disorder, then how are you ever supposed to get in line with this order? Because it is only getting in line with this order, living by this order, that the person can start to assimilate this knowledge. So this means you can walk into a class now and all you talk about is how it's all one, how it's all non-dual reality and how you are that. But it is utterly pointless because the mind that is listening to it is still out of alignment with the very principle that actually gives you moksha. And what is that principle? Grand order. You don't get moksha. You don't like put like moksha in your head. What gives moksha? That very grand order. So why do we have to align to that grand order? Because that grand order is the one that gives you what you're seeking. And who is closest to this grand order, which is called Ishvara? A Jivan Muktaha. That's what we're talking about. And what qualities does a Jivan Muktaha have? We're talking about his or her qualities in verse 13 to 19. What are those qualities? For example, we spoke about lack of hating. We spoke about having a sense of accommodation. That means you're accommodating various personalities. You're seeing all as your friends, or at least you're attempting to see how everyone is your friend and not an enemy. Freedom from intolerance. We spoke about intolerance from jealousy, intolerance from a lack of patience, intolerance from people that are around me, etc. We spoke about lack of emotional dependence. That means we're not saying now total emotional dependence, because that is impossible as long as you're enjoying a human experience. But we're talking about a binding emotional dependence whereby it's so strong that your whole life falls apart if you don't have it. That means you start thinking about it all the time as long as it's not there. That's what we're talking about when we say emotional dependence. We also talked about being careful not to provoke or invoke unnecessary agitation in those around us, in our environment. Now, suppose you're after moksha, right? Liberation, just a sense of like clarity and knowledge and harmony with the world and being in alignment with this order. Suppose that is your goal. And yet that very person who says, I want that, finds themselves agitated by the environment. So the question is, what is the environment which one is finding themselves agitated by? The grand order. The one that has given you this body to be aligned with that grand order. So let's do a little example to give you some context. Suppose you say, my spouse or my work is an obstruction to my liberation. So we can even take that statement apart now. How many errors are in that statement alone? My spouse, my work is an obstruction. So what is your spouse in your work? The grand order. My liberation, as if it's yours, right? So my work and my spouse is an obstruction. Very common statement. Or we kind of make this, whatever it is. I'm just giving you two examples. And I'm agitated towards them because they're an obstruction to my liberation. I'm agitated towards Ishvara, the one that is going to give me moksha, for obstructing me from moksha. I mean, how is that going to work out? I don't know. Now, let's take this example from the standpoint of having a mindset of an ownership that is my, and mindset of a trusteeship. Let's look at it from the standpoint of ownership. Since this is my body, my life, my time, and the spouse and the work is denying me what's mine, then how are you going to perceive that? How are you going to perceive your work, your career, and your spouse? As an obstruction. That's the first thing that needs to be looked at. Now, the irony of this is this very attitude, that means seeing what's in front of me as an obstruction, this very attitude is what leads to regression. But what's the person trying to do? They're trying to go into progression. So I am denying what's in front of me, and that very attitude causes me to regress back into my spiritual journey. Why? Because I'm rejecting what's in front of me. What's in front of me? Ishvara. So therefore, the spouse and the work becomes what? The very thing that you need to dissolve your resistance with. Because unless you do that, there's no moving forward. You see the importance of this teaching? So what do we do usually in spirituality? What's in front of me is an obstruction. So what do? I try to get rid of it. Instead, what's in front of me is the very blessing that I need to resolve my relationship with so that I may move forward. But we take it totally backwards. We say, no, my wife, my work, it's all there, just, it's a big burden onto me. Let's just get rid of it. As though that is the actual obstruction. But what's the obstruction? Your relationship towards the world. That just happens to be in front of you. There's nothing you can do about it, because who puts it in front of you? The grand order. You happen to be in that situation according to your prarabdha karma, according to the cause-effect relationship. So we want to progress forward. How? By first looking what is causing agitation in me right now. What am I with that I'm resisting? That's where I start from. That's where your spiritual journey begins. Not, oh, okay, move out of the way. I'm listening to this knowledge. This knowledge is way more important than you. That is not how this works. And yet, this is what most of us try to do. For example, to give you some context, for a long time, I thought that my business was an obstruction to my spiritual, little, obstacle. And I just kind of battled over, how do I look at this business and spiritual? How do I bring them together? But I didn't quit. So what did I do? For the longest time, I tried to see how to turn this business, how to turn customer and order processing and customer service, because that's what I do as business. I have to answer orders, process the orders, and do customer service. How do I turn this into a spiritual sadhana? So for years and years, that's all I did. Every email, every communication, every telephone call, I was treating that as a practice. How do I develop patience? How do I stop resisting them? How do I answer in a polite, gentle manner instead of just sort of, let's get rid of you next, let's get rid of you next. In other words, you take what's in front of you, what's in your life, and that is your very spiritual sadhana that you resolve in order to move forward. So we're not trying to now look over there or over there. The solution is where? Exactly where you find yourself right now, today. Now, suppose you leave your spouse or your work, right? Because this is an abstraction, right? In quotes. What's going to happen then? That same mind that's agitated, you still carry on with you. That means the same narratives continue. So nothing has changed. Even in the environment is Mars, Moon, Earth, you still have your mind with you. So where do you start? With what you have right now. Therefore, we convert our spouse and our work into a blessing, into a spiritual sadhana itself, so that you may expand and evolve further. There is no skipping. We're very clear in the Vedas about this. There's no cheating. Now, let's look at this from the mindset of a trustee. That was the mindset of an ownership. That means my time, my body, and therefore everything else that's obstructing that should be moved away. Now, let's look at it from the standpoint of a trusteeship. The very grand order that we're talking about, called Ishvara, is way more intelligent than your own mind. We don't even know how to run our own bodies. That's why we take our bodies to the doctor. That means we need someone else's specialities in order to help us with what we claim is my body. So that's the first point. That very grand order, the one that gives moksha, is way more intelligent than you. So what does this mean? You, as a person, are exactly in the right place at the right time every single day. There is no such thing as I'm in the wrong place at the wrong time. Why? Because every effect is on the basis of a cause. Every moment now is on the basis of something that has taken on in the past. So where do we start? We first acknowledge where I'm at, what I'm doing, where I happen to be, and who I happen to be with is exactly where my spiritual journey begins. How? By developing and reorienting my relationships with those objects, with those items that are around me, whether it's an object, whether it's your career, whether it's your wife, your children, your family, mother-in-law, etc. So this is the very highly crucial point that we need to address. Otherwise, we can talk about, the 5 stages of bhakti and jnani, and it's all going to be completely out of context. Because as you listen to that, it sounds good, but in the person, in their very life, in their very real life, day-to-day actions, keeps on avoiding those things that are around them. So this is why it's about embracing and not about excluding. This is the first point. The other point I want to mention is what defines your spirituality is not what you should have and what you shouldn't have. I should have a life, in a house that doesn't have any interruptions. I shouldn't have this person that's constantly kind of, in my presence and they're a burden, etc. I should have another child. I shouldn't have another child. So it's got nothing to do with what we should and shouldn't, but rather what is our relationship with what we have and what we don't have. That is what defines a spirituality. Not about our shouldisms, but rather about with what we have been presented with by the grand order, which is way more intelligent than you are and what you don't have. Take Mahabharata, for example. Who are the 3 wise people in the Mahabharata? Krishna. How is Krishna? He is colorful, joyful, active. He's the one that's in the battlefield, like fully engaged in life. How many wives did Krishna have? I don't know, but many, right? Constant engagement, dance, colorful, joyful, cheerful, constantly in life, maneuvering. What about Vyasa? How's Vyasa? Total renunciate, ochre robe, away from people. They only come to him when they have some questions, like one of those typical, rishis that we have in our minds. What about Vidur? How is he? He's a prince in a palace, politics, engaged in politics. And they're all wise. Now, can you find they're all wise, right? Is there any commonality in their lifestyles, in what they have and what they don't have? Zero commonality. What's the only commonality that they have? They're all wise people. So what I mean to say is external lifestyle, external, what you do externally, who you are with externally, has zero to do with wisdom. Your lifestyle has nothing to do with wisdom. The roles that you play in life has nothing to do with wisdom. What has to do with wisdom? A mind that is wise. Therefore, we cannot contribute only Vyasa to a typical person of being wise, because this is how we usually say, okay, only Vyasa, the one that's alone, pulled away from everything, no one's bothering him or her, only they alone are wise. What does Mahabharata display very clearly? Your lifestyle makes zero difference. So what I want to say here is, where do we start from? We look at our life right now and we begin to embrace it. You are exactly in the right place at the right time, and therefore start developing a proper relationship with those things that are around you. Because we just said very clearly, the lifestyle makes zero difference in one's wisdom. How many children you have, whether you live alone, whether you're with people, whether you're, a coordinator, a CEO of a company, it has no effect on one's wisdom. In fact, often, there's so many phrases that I've heard, things like, you have a child, you're not spiritual. Or the other thing is, if you're enjoying nature too much, then you're enchanted by nature. That means you're not spiritual. These are the notions that go on in the spiritual field, right? But what are we saying very clearly here? The choice of lifestyle that you live is entirely yours. But it does not define your wisdom. That means you can put on a long beard, an ochre robe, but it doesn't say how wise a person is. The only thing that says that is your actual wisdom, which only you know. Okay, can someone summarize what I said? What is the message that I've been communicating?
I guess that you need to remain ambivalent to your circumstances or your desires to improve yourself or achieve things, and actually look around you and experience what's actually coming in at that point in time right now, and form your relationships according to your impression of Dharma, I guess, is important in terms of how you form those relationships as your guideposts, in terms of how you respond and how you actually do things to cause no harm, but to make the most and the best out of those relationships for the benefit of everything.
Good, Martin. Thank you. Okay, Robert?
Yes, it's not the circumstances of your life or what appears that's important. It's your relationship to those circumstances and what appears, because the grand design and its intelligence has presented you with a perfect opportunity to establish that relationship as you need it.
To me, it's not the aptitude or a sense of victimhood which is going to carry us forward in our journey. It is our attitude towards everything that we are thrown at by life. So instead of playing victim and feeling sorry for ourselves or trying to find excuses, we need to further our journey to, on this path of moksha and dharma, we have to have first an attitudinal change and look at things in a different way, just like all of, the wise people do look at. They don't become extremely pleased with good fortune or sad by misfortune. So they try and look at it objectively and not, in a subjective manner, I guess.
Good. Yeah. So Kritika is saying is, look at every moment is a blessing. It's a lesson to learn from. What can I extract from what is around me and use that as my starting point for growth? Right? Because, the biggest thing that suppresses this growth is trying to be somewhere in the future, living in some bubble that we set up. And then we think that by stepping in that bubble, suddenly everything in the present is going to get fixed. But what does the Vedas very clearly say? You look at what's around you. Where am I having these resistances with? What am I not accepting? What do I think is an obstruction? That is where I start. That is your very blessing in disguise. And this is the greatest lesson that we can, literally provide, because then spirituality becomes very superficial and it doesn't become real.
There's a saying Sadhguru says that always sticks to my mind. He always says, whatever there is right now is all there is. It can't be any other way. And that this moment is inevitable, which pretty much summarizes what you've said as well. And he keeps pushing that point that what there is right now is all there is. You can't complain about it. It is.
Yeah. Yeah. And we said we cannot complain because it is facilitated by the grand order, which is way more intelligent than I am. So if I say this shouldn't be like how it is, then what am I saying? I'm smarter than the grand order. But what does a person, individual person know? They don't even know their own body, like what their body is made of. And here they're saying how things should be or shouldn't be. This means, according to my limited knowledge, I'm trying to put the entire reality in my little model. And if that reality doesn't fit in that model, something's wrong. And then we push things away. So let's move on to verse 16. Anapeksha shuchir dakshaha udasino gatavyataha sarvarambha parityagi yo madbhaktah same priyaha. So we read Jnana is not dependent on anything. Let's go on to the second headline. He is a shuchi.
The one who is endowed with saucha, cleanliness, both outer and inner. Outer cleanliness, vyaha saucha, begins with your physical body and extends to your clothes, the place where you live, and the environment in general. Inner cleanliness, antara saucha, is accomplished by various means. One of them is pratipaksha bhavana, deliberately bringing in a disposition that is the opposite of a negative one. By deliberately cultivating a positive disposition towards a given person, your hatred, anger, jealousy, and so on are neutralized. These do not exist in the natural expression of a wise man who is absolutely harmless.
So Shuchihi is referring to both, or having both, external and internal cleanliness. So what is external cleanliness? This is something that we can even practice as a sadhana. By the way, these qualities, some of them can be used as a practice of sadhana. Some of them are simply pointers or indicators of what it means to become wiser and wiser. Thus, you start to accept certain qualities. You start to take on certain qualities as natural byproducts, like lack of hating, that becomes a natural byproduct. So in this case, we can turn Shuchihi into a sadhana. So external can be about having a clean office or a home, or having a healthy body. These are all external indicators that also reflect the internal state of mind. If you take care of your body, your house, that there is some indication that you do indeed have that organized mind, or you care about your inner world. So external is the easiest to start with, as we can start with a garden, we can prune the leaves. It kind of makes you feel good that, your garden is clean, makes your mind feel clean. Now, what about internal? How do we now change internal cleanliness? Because see, this is an indicator. A wise person has internal cleanliness. Now, let's change this into a sadhana mode. What is internal cleanliness? First of all, it means to be rid of those habits which are binding. That means those habits which just sort of only kind of like dominate the life. They kind of dictate what we do and what we don't do. Or we can just call them unproductive habits. Those habits which could be less of, could be reduced. So we'll ask, how do we change unproductive habits? Because habits are what dominates the person's life. Habits in this case means samskara or vasana. How do we reduce the impact of these unproductive habits? The first thing you can do is you can write on a sheet of paper one impure habit that you would like to reduce. Just on a sheet of paper, write it out. And then put that on a wallpaper, or put it in your desktop wallpaper on your monitor. And then resolve to do that 10% less, because it's hard to get rid of a habit completely. So just say, I'm going to do it 10% shorter or 10% less, and whatever that less implies. The second is you can ask a question. What is lacking in me? When I say me, I'm talking about your mind, of course. I'm talking about Atma. What is lacking in me that's causing me to, and then the undesirable behavior? For example, what's lacking in me that's causing me to have the need to be acknowledged? What's lacking in me that's causing me to have the need to be seen or acknowledged? What's lacking in me that's causing me not to put this knowledge into practice? What's lacking in me that's causing me to have unworthy feelings towards myself? This is an inquiry question. This lets you look into your relative mind. This is about getting to know yourself. This is called real spirituality, not saying, get rid of this, just focus on the one. Okay. The second is you can say, what is it that I don't know that if I knew, I would, and then you can put a benefit. What is it that I don't know that if I did know, I would integrate this knowledge faster? What is it that I don't know that if I knew, I would enjoy others' success as though my own? What is it that I don't know that if I knew, I would be more creative? The fourth thing you can do is you can ask these 3 questions before we go to sleep. And they help us to see how productive our day has been. Firstly is, what have I learned today? What one thing have I learned today? Second is, what have I enjoyed today? Because if we're not enjoying today, you're probably not enjoying your life. Third is, what have I improved upon today? Or where have I contributed and what have I contributed today? Who is the ultimate contributor? Ishvara. The more of a contributor you are, the closer to Ishvara you are. What have I learned? What have I enjoyed? What have I contributed or what have I improved? The fifth thing in this statement I'm going to take, it says Pratipaksha Bhavana. So what is this? This is about finding a lighter thought or finding a lighter perspective towards your existing heavy one. What does this mean? Sometimes we carry these heavy thoughts. They just kind of pull us down. They have this weight onto them. They're sort of disempowering. You can call them even darker thoughts or just heavy thoughts. So now when a thought comes that's heavy, you just ask, what is an opposite version of this that would make me feel lighter, that will make me feel kind of more cheerful when I have this thought? For example, suppose you have a jealousy towards something or someone for being good or exercising a talent that you wish you had, and then go, I don't like them for that reason. So what we can do now is we can say, what kind of thought is a lot closer, more pure? We can say, I'm so glad that they are enjoying their well-deserved position because they have worked hard for it. Therefore, they deserve it. This is Pratipaksha Bhavana. You listen to your thoughts, those thoughts that are heavy, that bog us down, and we immediately take the time, a few moments, to come up with a positive, lighter thought. This trains you to think lighter, like a Jivan Muktaha, like a Jnani. Okay, and then it's Dakshaha.
Dakshaha here means one who is capable of understanding things as they are. Relatively, he can quickly assess the situation and do what is to be done. The action called for in a given situation depends entirely upon your estimation of it, which, if it is to be objective, cannot be prejudiced by your anxieties and fears.
Okay, that's enough. That gives us a good context. This is about honoring your mind's discriminative power, your Viveka Shakti. The greatest privilege that a human being is given is the ability to assess A or B. This is power of choice. An animal cannot even choose to be a carnivore for even 24 hours. In fact, it would die lying down by the meat, when all it has to do is just take one bite of the meat and it will survive. Whereas human beings were given this discriminating power to discern whether, what situation, where, what, how, where, and why. This is our privilege. And what does this do? It helps us to optimize or be more efficient with what we are doing. So this is where your power of choice lies. Now let's contrast this to a person that is yet to develop or yet to discover this discriminating power or yet to acknowledge this power. There's 2 extremes how we go about things. The first is we get carried away by whatever happens. Some kind of situation arises and then we just have this impulsive action. We just act. This is called aggressiveness. It is a lack of viveka, lack of discrimination. That means I'm not pausing, I'm not assessing, I'm not seeing what needs to be done. I'm just reacting unconsciously on whatever my program tells me how to act. That's one extreme. The other extreme is allowing oneself to be, this is called a doormat, being like a doormat, being mistreated, abused, walked over, all in the name of forgiveness, all in the name of being compassionate. This is the other extreme called being submissive. 2 extremes. What's Dakshaha? Dakshaha is neither of these extremes. What is Dakshaha? It is pausing, Because in order to think, you need to pause. Why do you need to pause? Because the mind's always going through its own thoughts. So therefore, step 1, pause. Step 2, assess what's going on around me. Step 3, on the basis of your assessment, through your viveka, through your discriminating power, act within the limits of your capacity. Pause, assess, and then act. That's dakshaha. What else is dakshaha? From a standpoint of a wise person, it means the wise person's vision is impersonal. What does impersonal means? It means that I do not get enmeshed. I only act within the limit or within the sphere of my influence. That's all that I can do. Because you're a limited individual. Whether you're a wise person or not, you're still limited by your capacities. Therefore, act within your limited sphere of influence and leave everything else at its own accord. Leave it to someone else. Suppose that, for example, there's an excavator that's on the run, like, the person fell out, or, and the excavator is just going and destroying the environment. And you happen to be in that scene and you're like, oh, I need to save the excavator. And there's a person next to you who knows how to operate this vehicle. You're like, no, I'm close to the excavator. I'm just going to go in and I'm going to stop. But you have no knowledge how to drive this vehicle. This is called acting out of your sphere of influence. So what do? We pause. Even though the excavator is on the loose, you still pause, assess, do I have the capacity to operate this vehicle? If not, then you act according to your assessment. Then you say, who does have the capacity to act, to perform this vehicle? You, okay, you go. So this is dakshaha. Pause, reflect, assess, and then act. Okay, and then it says udasinaha.
Udasinaha is one who does not take sides with a friend, mitra, or an enemy, satru. Any issue is relative, whether it is with reference to an economic system, a political system, a lifestyle, or any discipline.
Okay, that's enough. So udasinaha means I'm neither on your side nor on your side, because I don't belong to anyone. I use my discriminating power. I don't get enmeshed and choose on the basis of liking you and disliking you. I pause, I assess, and then I act. I'm neither on your side nor on your side. Therefore, what is a Jivan Mukta's mind? How does it operate? It just simply, as though, stands in between. That's called assessing. It looks at both sides and then it responds accordingly. It also means that the wise person doesn't get entangled in relative matters. Unless, of course, you're at work, because I get it. At work, if you're working for a company, sometimes you need to get kind of, quote, enmeshed in the, in the affairs that the company is going through, that the business is going through. But generally, the wise person doesn't get into these relative matters. For example, what's the oldest language in the world, right? Do you really know? You don't have all knowledge. So then what's the point of kind of getting into that conversation and, let me tell you which is language. It's just pointless because you don't have all knowledge. Is there free will? Don't get into those conversations. What's right and wrong? Another relative aspect. You can go on forever. What's healthy eating? What's a healthy lifestyle? What do you think of Mr. Trump? These are all relative topics that they just have no end. For whatever perspective they come from, someone's going to have something different. So the wise person doesn't get enmeshed in relative matters. Why? Because number one, your mind doesn't have all knowledge. You're not Ishvara. Yes, your truth is the same as Ishvara, but in terms of your knowledge, you don't have all knowledge like Ishvara. Number two, relative topics are only strictly between a student and a teacher in whatever subject matter it happens to be. If you're in geography, then speak to your geography teacher. In other words, don't take it outside the class because you don't know what qualifications others have or have not. Therefore, you're only asking for kind of like, well, let me tell you what I know, and then just kind of like picking up various opinions from different fields. Keep it strictly in class. And number three, the wise person's vision is already complete. Not relatively, because it's not like Buddha, suddenly is driving the car and then the car breaks down and he's like, oh, I know it's a second spark plug. It's not like that. The relative knowledge is still not there because you're not Ishvara, but your knowledge in terms of the reality of everything is there. So for that reason, what's the point of now getting into kind of like talking about, well, this clay, this pot, you know, is much better, and let me talk about this pot, and let me, you know, this pot is, you know, wiser and it looks taller. They're all made out of what? The one same clay. Okay.
Can I ask a question, Andre?
Shiva, yeah.
Shiva, yeah. So how does this relate to viveka or discrimination? In discrimination, you are basically choosing sides or choosing one over the other, a good pot versus a leaky pot.
Yeah, sure. So again, see, this is why in Vedanta, we make a very clear distinction between Vyavaharika and Paramartika. See, Vyavaharika just means you're in this transactional world. And from the standpoint of having this body, you still have to make decisions, and that involves using your viveka, your discrimination. But this means you don't get lost entirely into them, because you always have knowledge of this Paramartika. That means the one content pervading in and through all names and forms. So this means, yes, you still apply your viveka, but by the knowledge of all, the one content in and through all, it doesn't cause you to get lost and then, you know, say, well, let me tell you, let me prove you incorrect, I'm right, and so on. So it just makes it a lot easier to deal with this world. Next one is Gata Vyataha.
The one for whom fear and affliction of any sort is gone. Using the word gata, gone, indicates that fear was once there. In the wake of knowledge, it is gone. Fear, as we saw, comes from separateness. So the karma yogi cannot be called a gata vyataha. He can be only relatively free from fear, whereas a gata vyataha is free from any type of fear, including the fear of death, which is possible only in the wake of knowledge.
Okay, super, thank you. So Gata Vyataha is free from sorrow. Now we have to look into this, because it can be taken literally. So what does a jnani understand? Every experience is sculpted by three factors. First of all is your desha. Deshaha is your environment. If you're in a polluted place, is that air quality suddenly going to relieve the wise person and say, no, I'm not going to affect your lungs, I'm only going to affect some samsadis? No. So in other words, if you're in a particular environment, whether you're wise or not, you're still going to get a load of that environment. If it's noisy, you're still going to get a load of that. So that's first, deshaha, environment, sculpts the experience. Second, kalaha, time. Through the course of time, many things happen. In fact, the entire life is nothing but time, progression from moment to moment to moment. That also sculpts your experience. As I said earlier, if you say this is my time, time doesn't care that you said that. You're still saying that in time. Time still keeps flowing. In fact, it is time that made you say, this is my time. Leave me alone, this is my time. So, environment, time, and three, your prarabdha karma. Prarabdha karma simply means the consequences of your past actions. Cause, effect. These three sculpt everyone's experience. Time, environment, and your cause, effect. Prarabdha karma. Now, knowing this, is it now realistic to expect a constant bright future in life? No. Where's the question of having a life that's constantly bright and joyful and everything's fine and there's rainbows and there's sunshine and there's moonlight and there's love in the air, right? There's no question of that, because time doesn't care, environment doesn't care, and your prarabdha doesn't care about your likes and dislikes. They just keep on going impersonally. So who's the one that's supposed to align to these three? Are they supposed to align to your likes and dislikes, or you're supposed to align to them? You're supposed to align to them, because they just keep on flowing. And if I don't, this is called resistance towards life, which then prevents me from having a clear mind. So what do we discover so far? On the basis of these three factors, what is life? A mixture of highs and lows. So why is a wise person free from sorrow? Because the wise person has accepted this. This is called looking at reality as it is, instead of how I wish it to be. On the basis of that, you're free from sorrow. Because what is sorrow? Denying what's in front of me, as I spoke earlier. Life is supposed to be only positive, joyful. No, life is a mixture. Why? Because Vyavaharika reality is a dvandva. This means duality. High, low, up, down, bright, dark, hungry, full. It's constantly opposites here. So if I don't embrace these opposites, then it is sorrowful. What does this mean? The only thing that you and I can do on the basis of this understanding is develop a healthy attitude towards what happens. That's all. Because what happens is what happens on the basis of these three aspects. So what can you and I do? Develop a healthy attitude towards them. And what is this healthy attitude? There's many healthy attitudes. I'll give you one. Every experience is specifically chosen for you. Everything that happens, it is there just for you to learn something from it. So every experience is specifically catered for you to learn something from it. And it is ordained by whom? Ishvara. In a form of time, environment, and prarabdha karma. Now, does Ishvara know injustice? No. Therefore, is any experience unjust? No. So if I think that any experience is unfair or unjust, what does that mean? My understanding of Ishvara is still incomplete. So again, what is this healthy attitude? Every experience is specifically and beautifully catered for you to learn something from it. That experience is produced or generated by Ishvara in the form of time, environment, and prarabdha. Therefore, learn something from it because you got no other choice. So this converts our experiences from resistance to a blessing. Your wife now becomes a blessing. Your husband becomes a blessing. Children become a blessing. Instead of seeing them as an obstruction, as why me? I'm supposed to have this. I'm not supposed to have this. So these are all notions that we're trying to resist what is in front of us. Okay, next is Sarvarambha Parityagi.
Sarvarambha Parityagi is another important word. Arambha here is what is planned and initiated. All karmas are arambhas, in that they begin because of a sankalpa. Shankara, writing Bhashya, began at some point, and even Krishna began teaching Arjuna. No one is without arambha, the cause for which is kama, desire.
Okay, I think that's enough. There's so many Sanskrit words here. So arambha means undertaking, and sankalpa means intention. So no one is without a sense of undertaking. Giving up binding actions. What is a binding action? Giving up the need to keep doing actions which you think will bring you enjoyable results. Right? So this means an action that I have to keep doing because I think it's going to keep on bringing me an enjoyable result. These are usually called dharmic actions. That means I have to keep on giving charity. I have to keep on being good. Why? Because I'm looking at some agenda. By doing this action, I'm going to keep on getting some benefit in the future. So this means the wise person gives up the need to keep on doing these actions. Now the question is why? Okay. What does the action? The body. Is the body finite or infinite? It is finite. Can a finite body do an infinite action? Logically impossible. So where there is a finite body, finite thinking, finite mind, there is a finite action. If an action is finite, can an action that is finite produce an infinite result? Impossible. Finite body, therefore finite action, thus finite result. So now how many finites do you have to add to come to infinite? Finite plus finite plus finite plus finite, right? So what does this mean? If I keep on doing actions, thinking that I'm going to get, what's the only infinite principle? The self, Atma. So if I keep on doing actions to try to attain moksha or try to attain the highest reality, am I ever going to succeed? No, because the finite body is doing a finite action, thus I'm only getting finite results. This is why no matter what you do, it's not going to remove ignorance. The only thing that can remove ignorance is what's intended to remove ignorance, and that is self-knowledge. If I do an action like meditate, let me meditate one more time. What is meditation? Done by the finite body. It's a finite action, therefore I'm going to get a finite result. If I meditate one more time, what am I going to get? A finite result. and I say, no, I need to meditate again, you know, because maybe I'm going to succeed this time, it's still a finite result. So for this reason, the wise person has no need to keep on doing these finite actions, or these actions which are intended to produce a result. Why? Because every result is limited by nature. And who wants a limited result? Well, a lot of people apparently, but eventually you grow over that, right? So you say, you know, I don't need to just keep on pursuing more actions in order to get more results, because they're all finite.
Could I ask you a question here?
Yeah.
Andre? I was just contemplating on how the motivation for the body to do anything comes from a desire. And that desire, by definition, has boundaries and is finite. And so to me, the consciousness is to actually, you're going to have the desire. You can't stop that because of your vasana. The desire is going to come in. But to be conscious of that desire and see that desire for what it is, and just allow it to just rest rather than to pursue, helps you to retain that sense of renunciation, I guess, where the desire may be motivating you, but you're recognizing the boundaries and the finiteness of that desire. So you're not investing yourself fully in that. I'm just experimenting. I'm just trying to find out what that means. But I think you may understand what I'm trying to say.
I think what you're trying to say is, you see, the body has its own desire, right? So hunger, right? So obviously this hunger is also going to have its own sense of, yes, I do want to eat, because it is a limited action. I get it. So you can, keep on living for just one more day. So we also have to now, kind of look at into what level are you talking about? Are you talking about the level of the body, or are you talking about the level of these binding actions, these actions which I've learned from the past, which have taught me that if I keep on doing them, I'm going to keep on receiving a finite action. So we're just simply saying, releasing the need to keep on doing those actions. Whereas the other, there's also the reality of the, just like, having company and having expressing your talents and, keeping your body healthy, that is also there. So we're just simply using, as Sheila was saying, viveka. What here is unnatural, what here is natural. We're not trying to kind of discard, all of these, everything, because that's impossible as long as you're having a human experience.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's two, exactly as you said, there's two sides. One is the fundamental urges for things like food and shelter, those sort of basic forms of life preservation.
Yeah.
But the other is the imagination and the desires of what's going to make you happy, or what you think is going to be good, but they're still the desires that you need to understand as being finite in terms of the boundaries around them.
Yeah.
And as long as you hold them in your conscious awareness, as opposed to just blindly running after them.
Yeah, in the Vedas, for example, we have certain mantras that are supposed to get you to a higher loka after death. So an example of that, it would just be dropping that, because why would you want a loka? Even loka is just a finite experience, right? You're there for a couple of millions of years. A subtle body is there, right? You're not bound by this physical heavy body. But so what? That punya karma still exhausts, and you're back on earth in a couple of millions of years, and you have to start the journey all over again. So this means the wise person stops kind of seeking these experiences in the future, and doing these actions in the present to gain some benefit in the future. Because whatever is finite, it's still finite, right? The only thing that is worthy of pursuit is infinite, and it is self-knowledge.
And I guess what I'm saying is it's not wrong to have that desire.
Exactly.
It's just that you need to hold the image of the desire as what it is. And as you make your decisions consciously throughout your existence, that desire may change, because it's all part of the mithya, part of reality.
Yeah, good. So good. So this is why it's important to always bring two sides, because sometimes I speak and it's kind of like, okay, so this is how it is, permanently for all. So this means the jnani, gives up food and gives up everything. So this means you have to kind of use your viveka and to know what specifically are we talking? And then hold this teaching just in this context. So now if I say give up all binding actions, and you say, okay, so I'm not supposed to give up my work, I'm supposed to give up driving, and give up the need to talk to people, and give up friendships. Is this what we're saying? Absolutely not. Yeah. So we're talking about using still your viveka, but these are just these guiding points, guiders for you. And the second reason why the wise person gives up these binding actions is because if you think about it, can any karma palam top your fullness? Your nature being full, can any experience in the world top that? No. For that reason, what's the point of doing one more action in the hopes to get more completion? So jnani, having this knowledge full assimilated, clarity established, firm knowledge, on the basis of that, nothing can either distract me nor take away from me. On the basis of that, there's no need to keep on doing more actions. Now, of course, I'm not now saying, just do nothing, because that is impossible. As long as you have a human experience, you will have the need to do something, because your environment, time, and your prarabdha karma are still causing you from the standpoint of your body and your mind to think in a certain way and to do certain things. Yo na hrishyati na dveshti, na shochati na kankshati, shubha shubha parityagi, bhaktiman yaksame priyaha.
Okay, so ya who na hrisyanti, who does not get elated, na dveshti is not hostile, na shochati does not grieve, na kankshati does not desire, ya subha asubha parityagi, the one who has completely given up good and bad karma. Bhaktiman, the one who has devotion. Same priyaha, he is beloved to me.
Okay, thank you, Kritika. Okay, first is yaha na hrishyati na shochati. So this is not being emotionally overpowered by elation nor depression. Why is this? Because a wise person appreciates that your viveka shakti, your discriminating power, as I said earlier, is your greatest gift. So as long as you're a human being, that is your gift. And therefore you don't let emotional highs overpower or take away your capacity to be rational. That's why the wise person is not emotionally overpowered, because the previous sadhana, you have trained your mind to think. That's what a manusha means, a thinking being. Intellect is your guiding point of life, and emotions subserve to the intellect. But how do we usually go in life? We let emotions just impulsively start, and then the intellect starts to justify those emotions. So we are now simply acknowledging this intellect from a standpoint of a human being is the one that guides my life. Emotions simply respond according to the intellect's capacities. I'll give you an example. In Ramayana, remember when Dasharat exiled or decided to exile Ram, how did the people of Ayodhya and Lakshman respond? They were highly disappointed. They were overpowered by emotion. But how was Ram? Composed, right? In fact, he was as composed as any other time. Why? Because Ram's intellect is still working, whereas temporarily the people of Ayodhya and Lakshman's buddhi temporarily subsided. Therefore, they had this overpowering of disappointment and how could this happen, and this is unjust, etc. Whereas Ram, composed, still peaceful, able to think. Pause, assess, act. The other example is, suppose you have do some spiritual sadhana or some meditation, and you have this amazing epiphany. Now, what often happens is we get so overly emotionally overpowered by this that we don't reflect upon it. We don't say, what happened here? What could I learn from this? We just sort of like fall into this emotion and go, oh, this was so incredible. I loved it. And then it just passes away like one more experience. So what is this about? It's about saying, what happened here? What can I learn from this? What is this? How does this relate to me? What can I make out of this? Therefore, we're talking about using your discriminating power. Now, what's the least you can use your discriminating power for? The least you can use it for is to have that discrimination, to be able to say, when am I losing my discrimination? That's the least you can hold your discrimination. So this means the moment that capacity goes, then emotion comes. So the least you can do is, okay, you say, I'm starting to lose my discrimination. That is the least discrimination you can have. Therefore, we never lose connection to that capacity, which is what every human being is endowed with. For example, suppose an angry person, can an angry person in a car afford to get so angry that they lose their discriminating power as to how to drive? No, they're going to crash. In that same way, we can never afford to lose the discriminating power given to you as a human being. Otherwise, accident. And that accident has to be then accounted for later. Na dveshti na kankshati. This is freedom from expecting specific results from your past actions. I did this, therefore this should happen. This is a big one. This is what makes, what causes a life of sorrow, because, you know, we do something on the basis of our skills, and then, you know, we say, okay, so I'm so much worth value, and on the basis of my value, this is what I should receive. Suppose now, you know, I talk and I'm like, you know, everyone's supposed to give me a standing ovation. Everyone's supposed to love this. It's supposed to be the greatest speech. If I did that, I would not be teaching, right? In the same case, if you're working for an employer and you say, you know, on the basis of my talents and, you know, I'm Vedanta, etc., what I write, it should surprise people. You know, I should love it. What I say, everyone should be listening. So this is how we create these bubbles, our own rules. And if the world doesn't respond to those rules, then we go into a crash. It doesn't now mean that a wise person doesn't have likes and dislikes. This is the first important thing. We often think that a wise person is completely free of likes and dislikes. The point is, you have your sanchita karma. Sanchita karma is like a fountain of likes and dislikes constantly falling into your mind. So this means everyone, number one, including a wise person, will have likes and dislikes. The only difference when we says not dveshti, not kankshati is, even though you have likes and dislikes, you don't insist on getting specific results. So this is the attitude of karma yoga. Remember karma yoga earlier? This means exercise your talents, your skills, but understand what are the three factors that control the environment: time, environment, prarabdha karma. And you don't control these three. This is the grand order facilitated. Therefore, do not expect results, because it's only going to lead to disappointment. So all you can do is just do the best that you can. What happens, it is not up to you. Okay, next is Shubha Ashubha Parityagi. The mind has matured or gone over this need to do good actions to enjoy a future result. This is kind of similar to the previous one I was saying. Because first of all, every punya is finite. Even if you do something good, right, and you expect a positive result, or you have a positive result, that punya that is generated, it is still finite. That means it's not going to last. And what happens eventually? It gets exhausted. And then we go into this crash. Oh, I miss it now. You know, it was so good while I was having this experience, or this was in my life because I did something that, you know, brought it into my life as a result of my actions, and now it's gone, right? So there's this crash, there's this aftermath. Also, the wise person, we're still on Shubha Ashubha Parityagi, is disinterested in papa karma. What is papa karma? Taking advantage of loopholes or finding vulnerabilities and then saying, okay, so there's some vulnerabilities, some weaknesses, and I can kind of like exploit them and take advantage of that. Why does a wise person not do that even though nobody's watching? Because there's simply nothing to gain. And number two, you still know what controls the environment. The environment, time, and your prarabdha karma. That means you're still going to pay for the consequences as a result of taking advantage or exploiting those vulnerabilities. There's no escape out of it. So this means on the basis of these two, the Jivan Muktaha is in alignment with the grand order. Paramarthananda nicely says that punya karma is like a golden shekel, and papa karma is like an iron shekel. They're both just shekels, right? One of them is kind of, oh, I got a golden shekel, it's shiny, but it's just a shekel. It's just holding one down. So a wise person is free from the need to keep on experiencing these golden shekels over and over again, because they still hold you down. Samashatraucha mitrecha Tatha mana pamanayoho shitoshna sukha dukkeshu samah sangha vivarjitaha.
The one who is the same with reference to an enemy and a friend, so too honour and disgrace, the same with reference to cold, heat, pleasure and pain, and free from attachment. He only does not create enemies, but they arrive nevertheless just by his being himself. Suppose all he does is sit under a tree. There will always be someone who is jealous because he is not capable of sitting under a tree. Whether Jnani has a big palace or is simply sitting under a tree, someone will be jealous. There are so many reasons for enmity. You need not do anything at all. Even the shape of your nose can be good enough. That is motiveless enmity. Something about you reminds him of someone who once harmed him, and that invokes enmity. But how are you going to deal with those enemies? Bhagavan says he is Sama, the same. There is no change in anticoin of Riti, whether a friend or an enemy approaches. The enemy creates no disturbance, and the friend does not make him more secure or happy.
Okay, that's enough. Thank you. This is having an accommodating attitude towards all personality types. This means a Jivan Mukta has no need to classify who I like and who I don't like on the basis of their past or present statements or actions. They said this, therefore I don't like them anymore. They're in this school, I don't like them. So the question is why? Several reasons. First, everyone's behavior is temporary and it's also in context. Suppose there's an angry car driver and they're driving fast. Can you now define their entire existence on being some lunatic? Suppose they're actually someone cheated them on that day. That's also a possibility. They were innocent, right? They're a good person. Someone cheated them and now they're angry. And now they're on the road and I'm going like, what a lunatic. So every behavior is temporary and it's also in context. That's number one. Two, you have to ask, which specific behavior are you not liking? Can you pinpoint that out specifically? We need to find out. Are they moving a limb too fast? Are they, which word specifically triggered your thoughts towards them? What section of the sentence specifically caused that? Do you know? And number three, any behavior is a result of past influence. Because you don't know, that person may have grown up in an environment that is highly abusive. Right now, does anyone choose to be in an abusive family? Like, are you born and say, okay, before you're born, it's like, I want to be in an abusive family and I want to be trained how to be, like a real pain. Nobody does that. So you don't know. These three factors are there. It's temporary, it's in context. Two, what specifically is triggering? And three, this person is a result of many collection of different people, many influences. So now, are you supposed to be angry at them or the abusive friend, or the friend that got them into, trouble or something, or the abusive dad or the mom who wasn't there, or the brother or the sister? Who is supposed to be now angry towards? So these three questions help us to see that even if we're angry, what are we doing? We're taking one specific section and then we're painting that over the entire person and we're saying, I don't like them. So whether there's an agreement or disagreement, how does a wise person handle that? Suppose someone disagrees with the wise person, they simply remain factual and objective. What is the heart of this matter? Let's get a resolution here. In other words, they don't take it personally. Why? Because first of all, which specific behavior is causing that, that resistance? That person is a result of many influences. And number one was every behavior is temporary. On the basis of that, you can remain factual. You don't have to get insulted or take it personal. And then the text says, even though a jnani remains objective, it doesn't mean that others will also like him. Right? Others may still consider a wise person either a likable or a dislikable person. This is just the reality. Why? Because how are people ordinary? We don't have to define now, but how is general behavior? unconsciously I do what? I project unconsciously on the basis of my samskaras, on the basis of my past actions. This is how it is usually. So now you're doing nothing, right? As it says in the text, you just have an ordinary nose. Now suppose that person, was kind of like abused by someone who had a big nose, and you just happen to have a big nose. And now you suddenly become the victim of dislike. So this is called unconscious projection. And this nobody can stop. So these reasons help us to understand there is no reason to take anything personally because there are so many influences at play.
I guess that's the fundamentals of racism as well.
Yeah, it is. It's it's a generalization and then painting, on the basis of a certain skin color. My question is, what happens if you have this, this disease that destroys the pigmentation of the skin, and then the black skin turns into white? Is that person now suddenly relieved from racism? Right? A moment ago they were called black and etc. And now suddenly, you're the best, you're my best friend. It's that shallow if we don't investigate, if we don't ask these three questions. So that's why I pose these three questions. Otherwise, we remain at this surface level and we don't inquire deeper into the nature of this person. Tata mana apamana yoho. The wise person remains factual, whether honored or dishonored. Honored means respected, dishonored, disrespected. So let's talk about why this is. Let's bring it from aspect of honored. Why is a wise person still remaining factual and objective and doesn't take it personally when respected or when someone shows respect? Take a flower, for example. Can a flower help but to blossom? No, a flower innocently blossoms. And now when it does, it commands respect. Now, did the flower blossom to command respect, or it just innocently did so by its own nature? It did innocently. In that same way, a wise person cannot help but to shine their insights. The respect that a wise person receives just happens to be incidental. So it's not like the wise person is, wise just to get respect. It's just that their helpless nature to investigate into the nature of reality that just happens to command respect. Now let's look at it from the standpoint of dishonored. Why does a wise person remain objective and composed even when there is a disrespect towards oneself? Now think about it this way. When someone feels a sense of dishonor or disrespect, what does this mean? Suppose you feel disrespected now. It means you want people to treat you in a certain way. So this means the person has rigidly created a certain rule set, a certain table of what it means to be respected. If this matches, then I'm respected. If this matches, then I am respected. If these five match, I am super respected. So how do we now create this table? What happens? We create it through our life in a past, right? What happens now? Maybe with some friends, mom, dad, and then we create this rule set. Now let's look at the reality. This is how it is, right? We create this rules. And if this rule set gets satisfied, then I am respected. What is the reality? First of all, you may get respect according to your rules under 4 conditions. Number 1, you get more of what you wanted. That means your rules get satisfied even more. That means you feel super respected now. You may get opposite. That means you don't get anything of what you wanted. You may get less of, or you may get exact. I think I'm putting in the right order. You can get exactly as you wanted. You can get opposite, more of, or less of. Now, what do we depend on? We usually depend on more of or equal. But what about the other 2? So that's only a 50% chance there. Second, everyone is subject to moods. As I said earlier, it's unrealistic to expect a consistent bright future because it is a series of those 3 factors. So everyone has moods. If I'm lousy, I disrespect you. If I feel good, I'm neutral towards you. So even the moods of the other person depends on whether you're respected or not and how disrespected you are. Now, you don't know what the life of that person is, right? You don't know what happened in their day. Maybe someone kicked them, or maybe someone just kind of like scratched their car and now they're feeling lousy, and now you're kind of like in their space and they disrespect you. And you go, oh, what a person, what XYZ person. But you don't know what took place to cause them to disrespect you. Number 3, there are cultural differences. You expect to be respected in a certain way. And yet this person, whoever that is, has a cultural rule set that says something else. That means for them, respect is something totally different than to you. So to them, respect is one way, but to you, respect is another way. So this means on the basis of that, you never receive respect because it's a cultural difference. And the fourth one is, what if that person has a different way of showing respect than you expect? What if to them, respect is helping, like, just kind of doing favors. But to you, respect means I need to be told how great I am, how, like, what an amazing person I am. But they just don't do that. To them, it's like, what can I do for you? Like, I don't want you to do anything for me. So what are you saying? I don't want you to respect me. So these four are what you're up against. So only two so far guarantee. I get exactly of what I wanted, or I get more of. What are the other ones? You get less of, you get opposite. That's two. Moods, that's three. You've got cultural differences, that's four. You've got people showing respect in their own ways, that's five. So only two, so two guarantee and five don't guarantee. So can now a person go through life going 2 out of 5? No. That means waiting to have respect is out of the question. You only have 2 out of 5 chance. Okay, why else does a wise person remain objective towards honor and dishonor? Let's look at it from a higher standpoint. Because anything that is honorable or dishonorable, it's always in reference to mithya names and forms. It's kind of like walking into a golden store and you say to the keeper, please put all ornaments in 2 categories, one into dishonorable ornaments and into honorable ornaments. They're all what? They're all just gold. So whatever honorable and unhonorable qualities are being spoken of are all mithya. But what is mithya? What's the content of all mithya forms? One same satyam. Now, what about avatars? Avatars are incarnations of Ishvara. What about Rama and Krishna? Were they consistently honored? No. Look at Krishna, dishonored by Duryodhana. I think Shakuni was also, throughout the story. Now, if Lord himself gets dishonored, that is disrespected, then what to say about an ordinary person? If the Lord, the all-knowing Lord in a body, is disrespected and dishonored only to the lack of knowledge by those who are dishonoring, then what to say about you and I who are consistently walking around going, I want to be respected, I want to be treated in a certain way, and I want people to respond like this to me on the basis of what I know, on what I am, what I've done in the past, is just completely unrealistic. Because it takes a relatively wise person to see another wise person. But we don't find ourselves surrounded by wise people, maybe only in the class. Okay, a little riddle for you. In the Vedas, there are stories whereby when somebody disrespects or dishonors the Lord, then what does the Lord do? Lord gives them moksha. I think this happened with Sugriv's brother Bali, when Bali was shot by Ram's arrows. Remember that scene if you watched Ramayana? Okay, and then, Bali's like, I've been, and then Ram's like, I think it was Bali who said, I've been now given liberation. I've been freed by the Lord. What does it mean? Because in the Vedas, it says, Lord gives them moksha. The one who disrespects the Lord gives them moksha. What does this mean? Does this mean they give them liberation now? You just have to disrespect, dishonor the Lord, and the Lord is going to give you moksha. No. Moksha in that sense means it simply purifies your karmas. That means removes impurities. So moksha in that case doesn't mean Vedantic moksha that is only gained through Atmajnana. It just simply means in the next life you will get a new chance to exhaust out your papa karmas. So this is how 2 words, one moksha in the context of destroying impurities can also mean moksha in terms of liberation. And these are the small nuances that the Vedic tradition or the teachers tell us. Otherwise, we kind of confuse what it means. In fact, I'll give you now an example what it means to confuse these statements. Okay, the next one is going to be Shita Ushna Sukha Dukkeshu. Okay, here's a perfect example. Not thrown off by pairs of opposites. So this means the wise person doesn't get thrown off by pairs of opposites. And it says here, hot and cold. Now, suppose you're reading this and you go, okay, so they're not affected by hot and cold. Oh, okay, so if a wise person goes to Siberia, no, they don't care. It doesn't affect them. If they're in Qatar or Saudi Arabia, well, it doesn't affect them. What does it mean when it says not affected or they're equal to hot and cold?
Maybe in some metaphorical sense, like favorable and unfavorable situation.
Ah, good. Okay. So up, down, hot, cold, pleasant, unpleasant, strength, weakness, birth, decay, growth, death. All of these are what? Dvandva, pairs of opposites. What's the nature of reality from the standpoint of Vyavaharika, transactional reality? It is nothing but opposites. All day long. We wake up, it's day. You go to sleep, it's night. That is just the nature of it. So when it says hot and cold, it's just a metaphor, as Pawan was saying, for pairs of opposites. This is what it means to look at one word and then to think about it. What is it saying instead of taking it literally? I tell you, so many look at this one little statement there as literally as hot or cold. So they're like, oh, okay, so you're cold, you're not a Jivan Muktaha.
Can it also mean they don't have very strong likes or dislikes for hot? Like, I always like hot weather, so I like Brisbane, or, I don't like cold, so I'm not going to go to Siberia.
Yeah, absolutely. So they don't kind of, in fact, I think I shared it. Okay, we're going to say free from attachment a little bit later. But yes, it also means that. Okay, now let's turn this into a practice. How to not be thrown off by ongoing opposites. Because this is what, how, sometimes we are. We kind of like, oh, it's hot today, complain weather, it's unpleasant, there's some challenges in life. How do we now not get thrown off by ongoing opposites in life? Because that's the nature of life, right? Opposites. The answer is focus on problem-solving mode. Because if you don't focus on problem-solving mode, what's the only other solution? We get into our default mode, which is usually either complain or blow it up, make it bigger than it is. So now the question is, how do we problem solve? And I'm going to give you a little formula. This formula can be applied to anything, business, life, relations, or anything. Step one, you just look at the cops. How are the cops? They always remain calm. Why? Because the moment you kind of, give in, like emotional, then immediately your Viveka Shakti leaves, your discriminating power leaves. So deliberately remain calm, step one. This means intentionally breathing slower and deeper. Because if you stop, what takes over? I think it's called the reptilian system, or the flight or fight, right? And then it kind of like emotional tension, anxiety, and then you can't think. Then it's too late. So at all costs, preserve that discriminating power. As I said earlier, the least you can hold discriminating power is to be able to say, I am losing my discriminating power. That's the least you can have. Step two is to get clear on the situation. And that is to say, what am I noticing right now? What am I noticing? What is out of place? So you're defining the issue clearly, out loud or on a piece of paper. Why not in your head? Why are you not defining the issue in your head? Because all day long, how many thoughts go on silently in the head, and we just dismiss them. So whatever goes on in the head, we put very little value onto that. This is why I say, if you put it out loud, it immediately gains a much higher weight. If you put it on paper, it gains extra weight. So putting things on paper has enormous value. So step two is about defining the problem, asking, what am I noticing? What is out of place? In other words, you're defining it and you're acknowledging it. Step three is to reframe. You ask, could this be an opportunity to look into things differently? Could this be a calling for my discrimination to be used upon it so that I can see if there's a different way that I can look at this? Could I see things differently on the basis of this challenge? Step four, what is the ideal outcome that would benefit both me and the other side? This ensures that it's not selfish. So what is the ideal outcome that would profit or bring well-being to myself and to the other for both parties? And then you define that outcome. You envision that outcome. Get clear on what is the outcome. Step 5, apply one action that will get you closer to making that outcome which you have defined and envisioned happen. One step that you can take today to bring yourself closer to that outcome. I'll give you an example using these 5 steps. One time I was selling on eBay, and eBay is kind of like a fun thing that you can make money. And what I was doing is I was buying things at wholesale price, car parts, and I was selling them at retail. And it's something just I enjoy to do, right? Spare time. I had on eBay about 50 listings, and some fella duplicated every single listing. So all 50 listings, all the title names were duplicated, and including the sales letter, word for word copying. So what did I do? Step 1, remain calm. I didn't act immediately. Why? Because you first need to collect all of the information. So collect whatever you can. I collected who are they, what else are they selling? Do they have a website? The website was also like literally copying my most successful product. So that was the first. I didn't panic. Right? I didn't act impulsively or immediately. Step 2, I said, what am I noticing? Obviously, I'm noticing word for word, sales letter is being copied. But also I'm noticing my profits have decreased. Step 3, can I look at this as an opportunity? I didn't see any opportunity back then at all. I'll get to that one. Step 4, what is the ideal outcome? The ideal outcome is that they take down all those listings because it was really annoying me, right? I took so much time to A/B split test, right? Which sales letter works, which doesn't. It was like years of work. It was just all copied. It was like several pages of copy. Step 5, do one action to move closer to your ideal outcome. And what was that? Report this person, all those listings to eBay. Was it successful? Absolutely. But what do we keep on saying? Is life that linear? Absolutely not. What did that person do? He then said, okay, fine, I'm going to retaliate. So that person then contacted eBay and said, see this fella? He's stealing all of those listings from my website. And that website was actually my sales letter, right? So he created a website that had my sales letter on and said to eBay, see this website? This is the original website. All of those listings are all copied from my website. Guess what? eBay took down all of my listings. So what did I do? I then, I told eBay, this is a absolute retaliation. And I showed all of the evidence, how my sales letter was there for years. I showed all of the proof. eBay didn't buy any of it. They just kept on taking all of my listings down. So this means overnight, my profits just decreased about 70% because my eBay at that time was my major income source. So what did I do? I went to step 3. What's step 3? You look at this as an opportunity. So I asked, could I look at this as a way to see things differently? Could I do things differently on the basis of what has happened? Yes. So I said, eBay is taking 6 days a week, 8 hours a day, because if you get one little delay, they leave negative feedback. Negative feedback equals less profits. So it was constantly forcing me to be there with the customers, right? It was taking all of my time. So what I'd say, it doesn't matter. I think it's time to move away from eBay. So I sent all of the traffic and I got some SEO packages, right? Some A/B split testings on Bing, Facebook, Google AdWords, different marketing channels. All of that I redirected to the website. So all those hours that I was spending just kind of keeping customers happy to not leave negative feedback on eBay, I spend it all on the website. What happened 1 year later? My work time went from 6 days a week to 2 days a week. From 6 hours a day to only 1.5 hours a day. Has the profits been lost? Absolutely not. All of that traffic is now back. Everything's fine. In fact, if that didn't happen, if I didn't apply step 3, I would not be teaching this because, if you're working so long, there's no time to study. So this is a formula which can be applied. Why am I saying this? How? Every loss has a hidden opportunity. If we don't look into that hidden opportunity, we keep on doing the same old thing and you just keep on losing out. Now, what I want to say is life cannot be put into a formula, by the way. This is just a formula that I just sort of created on the spot to kind of give you, to inspire you how to think. Because life is not about, okay, just apply, go back to step one, breathe, right? Step two, kind of envision the ideal, etc. It's not like this. I'm just giving you a template how to think. You're supposed to create these solutions on the spot. Sangha vivarjitaha. This is freedom from attachment. This word attachment is a huge word in the spiritual world. So we will first define what is attachment. Attachment means I need this to give me a sense of fullness, to give me a sense of well-being. And if it's not present, then what happens? I immediately notice that and start thinking about it, start missing out on it. So the moment it leaves your space, immediately all of your thoughts and your focus goes onto that object. You start imagining, I need it for my well-being. Without it, I'm small, I'm little, I need it. So it takes all of your brain processing power and redirects it to that object of attachment. That's attachment. Now the question is, why is a wise person free from attachment? What is attachment? In other words, if I put it in another word, it's the need to control your environment. In other words, I have to have this. So what do? I control the environment and I make sure it is in my presence. That's called attachment. That is the need to make things as I want them to. There's two reasons. First of all, the wise person's sense of fullness is far greater than any object can match. Right? If your fullness is complete, then how can any object match that? There's no logic there. So that's the first reason. The second reason is, we'll bring it a little bit more down to earth, is as things come, you have a certain attitude. And what is the wise person's attitude? Take it as Bhagavan Prasada. It is a gift of Bhagavan. It's a blessing. That means every experience is a teacher. Every experience is an opportunity for you to learn, to draw something from it, and to grow so that you can have a next milestone in life. For example, I just want to bring it back to the concept of what I was saying earlier. We all want to grow, right? Absolutely. And suppose now we're uncomfortable with something. We're uncomfortable with X. We'll just put X, whatever it is. You kind of like, have some resistance towards X and you don't want to embrace X and you're uncomfortable towards it. So then we avoid it because we think it's like a hindrance to your growth. It's a hindrance to your liberation. Now, what did I say earlier? Whatever is in front of you, you need to embrace. Why? Because whatever is in front of you is the present now. It's the present moment. Now, what is the closest manifestation of Bhagavan? The present moment. That is why whatever is in front of us, we need to embrace. We need to find or change our relationship with. Because if you want Bhagavan, where is Bhagavan? Right in front of you. Therefore, this is about redefining our relationship with the present moment. Also, this dependence, having attachment, it's also sometimes reinforced culturally. For example, we hear statements like, you're my better half. Sounds romantic, doesn't it? Oh my God, you're my better half. What else do they say? My life is empty without you. I need you. Oh my God, I need it. Sounds romantic, doesn't it? But what does it do? It actually reinforces this need for attachment. So suppose I say to you, like, I need you, my life is empty. And you kind of respond, like, oh my God, you hug me. And then what does this mean? It's now giving me an anchor. Every time I say, I need you, my life is empty without you, I'm going to receive a hug. So in other words, I just kind of put myself deeper into a rabbit hole. And finally, I want to bring this to, just to bring it down to earth. It is not entirely possible to be completely detached as long as you're having a human experience. This is very important because we often think that, a wise person is so unattached from the world, they just don't need anything. As long as you're a human being, you will have one emotional dependence or another, even with your partner. So when it says Sangha Vivarjitaha, it's talking about binding attachments. What is a binding attachment? As I said earlier, I need this for my well-being. The moment it leaves, all of your thoughts go onto that immediately. Now you're going to say, what about a mother? What if, a child at school and, you're naturally now thinking about, your child. Again, this is natural. This is why I said earlier, you need to use your discrimination. Otherwise, we start to categorize every single experience into these statements. And this is what Martin was bringing actually forward. Okay, before I close, any thoughts you would like to share?
Yeah, verse 17 finishes with the line, who has devotion is beloved to me. And verse 19 finishes with the same line, who has devotion is beloved to me. The reason I bring this up, I visited a friend last week who is dying. He's an old man, who is a philosophy professor, has a degree with life, very even man. And he said to me, I believe in God, I believe there's an intelligent order, but I'm incapable of devotion. And I find myself in much the same situation. How do you address that? What do I say to such a man or myself?
Okay, well, first of all, you need to understand what devotion means, because if you don't define what devotion is, then you will be looking for devotion and then you find yourself already being devoted. For example, you're interested in self-knowledge. That is devotion. You're listening to this session, right? And if you're not listening to this, you're listening to something else. That is devotion to truth. So that question is on the basis of what? Not having defined what this word means, and now I'm expecting to kind of go into some bubble of devotion, but I haven't even defined what devotion means.
Not feeling the emotional response of worship is more like an intellectual understanding.
It's still devotion. Devotion just means interest to something. You have a attraction for something. That's devotion.
I guess what you're saying is that you're changing your focus back into duality again to try and be devoted to something that's an object as opposed to recognizing consciousness. And that's the only true devotion is the devoted to the self, the consciousness, the awareness. And that's it.
Yeah, and you can also expand that because, everything we talked about Satya Mithya, the content of every pot is the same clay. So you can devote towards an object as long as you know the one content is consciousness, then you're still devoting towards consciousness, right? So this means if I don't have the knowledge of Satyam, then I'm devoting to what? Individual objects. The moment you bring in Satyam, then you're not only you're still devoting to the one, but now in different forms. So this means your devotion takes on a much more expanded view. Sarve bhavantu sukhinaha, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.